I like the book for what it is, and I'm not saying I wish the book was different, but some of the other changes I just like because it just works so much better in the medium of filmmaking, you know? And so just knowing what to include and what not to when changing the medium is so important. Cord Jefferson adapted this book and he did a fantastic job. And like I said, like he puts his own twist on it, but they all just work so well for a movie. So, hello and thank you for joining me here today at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today I am talking about the movie American Fiction, directed by Cord Jefferson and released in 2023, and I'm comparing it with the book it is based on, Erasure by Percival Everett, released in 2001. And both book and movie are about Monk, a frustrated novelist who is fed up with the establishment that profits from black entertainment that relies on tired and offensive tropes. To prove his point, he uses a pen name to write an outlandish black book of his own, a book that propels him to the heart of hypocrisy and the madness he claims to disdain. And I will begin with my spoiler-free thoughts on both book and movie, beginning with the book. So this book was very witty and clever and funny in a dark humor kind of way. Like there's a ridiculousness to this story and it's very entertaining, and yet at the same time there's a sadness to the character of Monk and the situation he is in, both with this book he is writing, but also with what is going on with his family. And so even with the humor, this felt like more of a somber kind of a book. And this is a book within a book because we do read the story that Monk writes, and so that was really interesting. It's like a play on Native Son, and I did do a book versus movie for Native Son back in 2022, and so I am familiar with the story. And because we hear all of Monk's story and because we hear about all of these things going on in his personal life, it definitely seemed like Everett did that intentionally, right? And we're supposed to see parallels between the character of Van Gogh and Monk's story with Monk himself, and that is a theme I will be getting into later in this video. And then Erasure is also broken up with different vignettes, and because this is written from Monk's perspective, and so sometimes he'll break up the story with sharing a book idea or just these like fake conversations between historical figures and just different things like that. And I think I'm just like not knowledgeable enough to have understood every vignette because some of them just went over my head and I didn't quite get it. But for the most part, I did enjoy those, and it was an interesting added element to the story. But also this book, something that was kind of surprising is that it starts to have a surreal feel as the story goes on, because Monk kind of is like losing his grip on his sanity and on reality because he is like split into three different personalities kind of. His full name is Thelonious Ellison. And so you have the Thelonious Ellison side of himself that like deals with all of his professional book writing things. And then you have the Monk side, which deals with the family stuff going on. And then you have the persona he has created called Stag R. Lee, which is the pseudonym he uses for his book. And so then he has to pretend to be this character as well. And so he just kind of starts to separate into these three different people, and then, you know, near the end things all kind of come together, and yeah, it just gave the book a very surreal vibe at times. And later in this video I am going to be quoting an essay I found online by Irene Rose DeLilly, and she provides a great analysis of this book. She wrote it in 2013, so she doesn't talk about the movie, but I highly recommend it. If you want a deeper analysis of the book specifically, you should check it out. But like I said, I will be quoting sections of it later in this video. And on to the movie review. I really liked this movie as well. I thought it was a fantastic adaptation. We get fantastic performances, two of which were nominated for Oscars recently. And this movie, like, it's faithful to the book, but it has its own take on the story, which was just so clever and so well done. And it also has that dark humor from the book, and yet, even though like it has the sadness too with certain elements, for the most part the movie does not feel as sad or somber as the book. And in general, it just has more comedic moments, and it also has more touching, heartfelt moments too. So the tone is a bit different than the book, but they both are just witty and clever and have these moments of dark humor. And obviously it's making a commentary on the entertainment industry and how people will believe stereotypes. And when Monk is writing his book, we see two actors, because he's in a study typing, and then we see these two actors appear in the room with him and they act out the scene he is writing. And this again was just such a clever way to film this scene, and it was so cool. And in the movie, this is all we see of the book he writes. So like I said, in the book Erasure, we read his book that he publishes, whereas in the movie we just get this scene right here in his study and that's it. But this scene does tell us enough of what we need to know about the book he has written. And yeah, there are just so many fantastic conversations between different characters, like just such great dialogue, so many amazing lines. And yeah, I would highly recommend this movie. You should go see it in theaters while you have the chance. And if you enjoyed this movie, you should definitely check check out the book as well, because I think if you like one, you will like the other. And from here on out, I will be getting into the details of the plot, which means there will be spoilers going forward. And also I wanted to say that some of these characters have different names from book to movie, but in order to simplify things, I'm going to refer to everybody by their movie names. So I'm going to start with Monk and his family. And so right off the bat in both book and movie, we get a taste for who Monk is. And in the book we read, while in college, I was a member of the Black Panther Party, defunct as it was, mainly because I felt I had to prove I was black enough. Some people in the society in which I live, described as being black, tell me I am not black enough. Some people whom the society calls white tell me the same thing. I have heard this mainly about my novels from editors who have rejected me and reviewers who I have apparently confused. The hard, gritty truth of the matter is that I hardly ever think about race. Those times when I did think about it a lot, I did so because of my guilt for not thinking about it. I don't believe in race. I believe there are people who will shoot me or hang me or cheat me and try to stop me because they do believe in race because of my brown skin, curly hair, wide nose, and slave ancestors, but that's just the way it is. And yeah, we see in both book and movie that he is very resentful of the black stereotypical tropes that he sees in both books and movies. And in both, early on, he is visiting the East Coast, and that is where his mom and sister live. And so we are told he is not close to his family, but since he is in town, he will pop in and say hi to them. And in the book, he is going to the East Coast for a writer's conference where he will be doing a reading. And we are told prior to this that he writes dense books, which are inaccessible. Like when he's talking to his sister, she's like, you know, it's so great you're a writer. I just wish you would write something that I can read. And at this conference, we read what he shares. And I honestly, like, even after reading it, I could not tell you what I just read because it was very dense. And so I love that we get that look into the kind of writing that he usually does. But yeah, then he stops in to see his sister and his mom. Like I said, his father has died at this point in both book and movie, and he and his brother moved away. And so his sister is left to care for their mother, who is starting to have Alzheimer's. And so the sister is under a lot of stress because she is also a doctor with her own practice, and she performs abortions. And in the book, we hear that there are angry picketers in front of her clinic all the time. And on top of that, she also semi-recently got divorced. And this is all shown in the movie aside from the picketers. We do not see them in the movie. We just see that she has to go through a metal detector to get to work. And so, yeah, in both, she's very stressed. However, in the movie, we see more of a playful side of her, and like the back and forth she has with Monk was like very funny and entertaining. Whereas in the book, she was just more on edge throughout the whole visit. And in the movie, while he is at lunch with his sister, she has a heart attack and then she dies. Whereas in the book, I think he had flown back home, but he gets a phone call telling him that Lisa, the sister, she has been shot by one of the picketers outside of her clinic, and that is how she dies in the book. And so in both, he is left to care for his mother now because his brother Cliff, he is going through a lot of personal and financial issues because he recently came out as gay, and so his wife is divorcing him, and that is causing him to have tight finances. Plus, like with his job, he doesn't have the flexibility that Monk has. And so now Monk comes out to the East Coast to stay and look after his mother, and because she is getting sick and having these episodes, he wants to put her in like a convalescence home. However, that is very expensive, and he has a book he is trying to sell to publishers, but no one wants to buy it. And so he is just at his wit's end, both professionally and personally. But while all of this is going on, he hears about a new book that has been written by a female Black author. Her name is Centaura Golden, and her book is called We's Lives in the Ghetto. And he does not read the whole book, but he hears different excerpts and reads different sections, and he sees her being interviewed. And based on what he hears, he feels that this is one of those books that he hates because it feeds into these Black stereotypes, which he finds offensive and regressive. And so he is just very bothered by them. And also in both, he goes to a chain bookstore and he sees that his books are in the African American Studies section, and he is very bothered because he's like, my books have nothing to do with African American studies, but simply because I am Black, that is where they place them. And yeah, and he just sees people like Centaura Golden as kind of sellouts, right? Because her book doesn't reflect her life either, and yet she's just giving the people what they want with these stereotypical stories. And so while all of this is going on and he's just very frustrated and upset, he writes a book called My Pafology, whose main character is named Van Gogh, and it's not meant to be taken seriously, but he sends it to his editor editor, and the editor gets it, and he's like, what? Like, obviously you don't want this sent out, right? Like, this isn't for real. It's so ridiculous. But he's like, no, like, send it out. And don't tell them it's a satire, because anyone with a brain can tell that it's a satire, and you would have to be an idiot to take it seriously. But what do you know? The publishing house he sends it to love it. They do take it seriously, and they offer him a huge advance. And Monk and his editor are both in shock. And Monk, he doesn't want to sell the book because he feels like he would be going against everything he stands for. But the editor convinces him to sell it, and he is in a tough financial situation, and so ultimately he agrees. And not only do these publishers want it, but it also reaches a Hollywood executive who he meets with, because the Hollywood exec wants to turn it into a movie, and he offers him millions of dollars. And you know, these people want to meet the author, Stagg R. Leigh, because Monk didn't put his own name on this book. And the name he uses for this book is a reference to the song Stagger Lee. And so when he's talking to them on the phone or meeting them in person, he kind of puts on the persona of Stagg R. Leigh and pretends to be, you know, what these people expect him to be. And in the book, he is thinking about how with the things we create, like there is artwork that is created, but then there are like functional items that we create, like a chair. And he says, this is what occurred to me regarding my Pafology. The novel, so-called, was more of a chair than a painting, my having designed it not as a work of art, but as a functional device. Its appearance a thing to behold, but more a thing to mark, a warning perhaps, a gravestone certainly. And in both, before the book is officially published, again, Monk, he is just in disbelief that these people are buying this and believing it. And so he kind of, on one hand, he doesn't want it to be published, right? But he also is kind of almost just wanting to see how far he can push it. And so he tells them before the book is published, he wants to change the title from My Pafology to the F word, like F-U-C-K is what he wants the title to be. And what do you know, the publishers come back and they're on board and they agree to do it. And while all of this is going on with his book, he, as Thelonious Ellison, is reached out to by this literary award which wants him to be a judge on a panel they have. And as he and the other judges are making their way through the books they have to read, the F word, his book, is submitted near the end, and the other judges, who are all white, end up loving the book. And Monk, the only black man on the panel in the book, he does not want this to win the award, but all of the white judges say like, no, like this is the best one. This deserves to win. We outvote you, so this is gonna be it. And the conversation between he and the judges in the book reads, I would think you would be happy to have the story of your people so vividly portrayed, Hoover said. These are no more my people than Abbott and Costello are your people, I said, considering that I had perhaps offered a flawed analogy. I learned a lot from reading that book, John Paul Sigmarsson said. I haven't had a lot of experience with color, black people, and so F was a great thing for me. That's exactly what I'm talking about, I said. People will read this shit and believe there is truth to it. And then the movie makes a change where Centaura Golden, the author of We Lives in the Ghetto, she is also placed on this panel. And I loved this change in the movie because we get to see more into her as a character, and we also get some great dialogue between her and Monk. And when they're talking about different books that are in contention to win the top prize, the white judges all love the F word and they want that to win. But Centaura actually does not like it, and she calls it pandering, and she and Monk are against it winning the top prize. But the three white judges, you know, it's 3-2, and so the F word ends up being the winner. And it's ironic because the white lady is like, you know, it's just such an important time to listen to black voices, and that's her reason for choosing the F word. But it's ironic because they're ignoring black voices, because Monk and Centaura both don't want the book to win, and yet they aren't listening to them. And later on, when it's just Monk and Centaura, he asks her, he confronts her being like, you know, so you don't like the F word, but how is that any different than your book, which he also feels is stereotypical. And she tells him how, like, you know, I based my book off of real interviews and real people, and I did a lot of research. And they just have this great back and forth, which was just such a fantastic scene. And again, I just loved that we see more into her as a character and her reasons for writing her book. And then I also need to talk about Coraline. I think her name is spelled Coraline. She pronounced it differently in the movie, but now I can't remember exactly how she pronounced it. But anyway, Monk, he is staying with his mom at a lake house, and he ends up dating the woman who lives across the street, and her name is Coraline. And in the book, they don't date for too long, because when they are having sex for the first time, he sees that she has a copy of We Lives in the Ghetto on her nightstand, and he stops and he's like, have you read that? And she says yes, she read it and she liked it. And so he rolls off and he's like, I can't believe someone like you would read that and like it, and like, how can you be so stupid? And he's just very insulting to her. And so she tells him like, I think you should go. So he leaves and he never hears from her again. And in the book we read, it was not her lack of taste or possession of questionable taste that caused me to make a scene upon finding that awful novel by her bedside. I reacted because the book reminded me of what I had become, become, however, covert. And in the movie, he dates her for longer, though. Like, I don't know how long. It almost seems like months. I don't know how long he was at the lake house with his mom, though. But regardless, we see much more of her, and she interacts with his family, and they all love her. And she was just such a likable character, and I loved any time we had a scene with her. However, as things are going on with the F word, we actually see it get published in the movie. And one night he is having dinner with Coraline, and he sees that she has a copy of the F word. And so he's like, "You've read this?" And she says, yes, she read it. She liked it. And again, he is very belittling and insulting, being like, "I don't know how you could read this and how you can like it." And again, she tells him, like, "I think you should go." Also, something she says to him during this conversation that I loved, she's like, "I hope one day you learn that not being able to relate to people isn't a badge of honor," which was a great line. And yeah, he leaves, and he does reach out to her later in the movie, but she never responds. And then, of course, I need to talk about Cliff, his brother, who is played by Sterling K. Brown, who I love. So again, he recently came out as gay, and so we see him kind of navigating this new lifestyle as he is embracing who he is. And in the book, it was interesting because him being gay was almost like a bigger thing, because Monk, there's a lot of flashbacks throughout this book, and a lot of them either relate to his father or it relates to Cliff being gay, but how Cliff and his family, none of them would acknowledge the fact that he was gay, even though they all suspected it. And so yeah, that was a really interesting element to the book. And we do not get any flashbacks in the movie, but we do see a lot of Cliff. Like, he is around Monk more in the movie, so even without the flashbacks, we do still see him a lot. And in both, they butt heads, but in the book, eventually they get in a disagreement so big that Cliff decides to just leave. And when Monk comes home and sees Cliff is gone, Cliff has left a note, and one note says, "There's a letter upstairs explaining everything." And so he goes upstairs to find the letter, and all it is a note that says, "F you, Cliff." Which was pretty funny. Whereas in the movie, like I said, we still see he and Cliff butt heads a lot. And there's also a moment when Cliff is slow dancing with their mom, who again has Alzheimer's. And while they're dancing, she says something like, "Oh, I always knew you weren't one of those queers." And Cliff understandably just shuts down and he leaves. However, we later find out he didn't actually leave because their housekeeper Lorraine is getting married at their lake house. And so Monk and his mom return to the lake house and they see that Cliff is there and that he actually never flew back home. He had just gone to the lake house. And Monk is very upset and he's like, "Clean up this mess and get out of here. Like, what are you doing?" But Lorraine, the housekeeper, she has worked for them for like their whole life. And Lorraine sees him and she's like, "What? Like, don't go, Cliff, stay. Like, I love you, your family. Like, I want you to be at my wedding." And this, again, was just such a sweet, touching moment between he and Lorraine. And it is followed by, Lorraine's wedding, which again was just a very tender moment. And the wedding scene ends with them all dancing at the reception. And then Monk is sitting alone and Cliff walks up to him. And at this point, Monk has pushed Coraline away. And Cliff tells him, like, "There are people who want to love you. Like, you need to let them love you." And he also says how he's been having a lot of regret lately, feeling sad that their dad never knew the full Cliff because he didn't come out as gay until after his death. And Monk says, like, "But what if he had rejected you for who you are?" And Cliff says, like, "At least he would have rejected me for who I really am." And again, this was such a great section of the movie, such a great line. And it is such an important message too, right? And it might seem cliche, and yet it is such an important message for all of us to learn. And it's easier said than done, right? To like embrace who you really are and to be yourself, because it is better to be rejected for who you really are than to be accepted for someone who you're pretending to be. And yeah, it was just such a great section of the movie. But also, speaking of Lorraine's wedding, like, none of this stuff is in the book. And Lorraine's wedding, we don't even see it because Monk and his mom show up and his Monk like has an outburst, and so they leave early and they don't even get to see the wedding. And then he does not make amends with Cliff by the end of the book because, the last we hear of Cliff is that FU note. Whereas in the movie, we do see that they do like have a better relationship and we see them together in the end of the movie. And so as funny as that FU note was in the book, I do like in the movie that we see them repairing their relationship. And then I did want to mention their father, because in both, even though he isn't in the movie, he is still a presence. And in both, we find out that the father had been cheating on the mother. And in the movie, Lisa is the one who says that after his death, she found letters between he and past lovers. Whereas in the book, it is Monk who finds these letters. And like the mom, either the mom wanted Monk to find the letters, or maybe the dad wanted wanted him to find it, I'm not sure. But he finds letters between he and one specific woman whom he had a child with. However, the father never reached out to his daughter, but Monk does. He tracks her down and he meets up with his half-sister. And she is doing very poorly. She's living in poverty, essentially, and she has like a neo-Nazi relative who is there. And Monk, he gives her a check for $100,000 because at this point he's making a lot of money from his book. And so he gives her a check and then he leaves. And none of this was in the movie. We just hear that the father had affairs, but that was it. And to talk about the ending now. So in both, Thelonious Ellison, he is at the award ceremony where he knows the F word is going to win the top award. And so when they announce that Stag R. Lee is the winner, in the book, Monk gets up and he starts walking to the podium, which confuses people. But as he is walking, he starts to get delirious and he sees like his childhood self holding up a mirror. And in his reflection, he sees that he has become Stag R. Lee. And this is also being televised. And so as he is like almost fainting and being delirious, he looks into the cameras and he quotes a line from his book where his main character Van Gogh is on TV because he's being arrested. And Van Gogh says something about like, oh, like I'm on television. And Monk quotes that line and then the book ends. So very ambiguous. And that essay by DeLilly, she says of the ending, in many ways, Everett has created two characters that mirror one another, Van Gogh and Monk, and who arguably are a reflection of Everett's own irritation. By the end of Erasure, Monk has become Van Gogh, the self-loathing and self-destructive main character of his acclaimed novel. This transformation can be seen by looking at Monk's difficult relationship with his own family, his constant struggle with double consciousness, and his anger with the larger oppressive system of racial injustice in America, which eventually leads to a tragic conclusion. Whereas in the movie, so it ends with him at the award ceremony, and when Stag R. Lee is announced, he walks up to the stage, and then Coraline runs in because he had texted her, and he's standing at the podium, and he's like, I have a confession I need to make. And then it fades to black. And then we go to seeing Monk talking to the Hollywood executive, because he has told the Hollywood executive the truth, and he's like, I want you to make a movie about my experience. So we're not adapting the F word anymore. This is about me. And so that's how he wants the movie to end, with it fading to black. And so the executive is like, what? Like, no, we can't have an ending like that. It needs to be something more concrete. And so they go through different ideas. Before Monk, he tosses out an ending where, also I forgot to mention, in the movie, they tell people that Stag R. Lee is a wanted fugitive. And so he tosses out an idea for an ending where he goes up to the stand and he admits that he wrote the book and he like is Stag R. Lee. And as he makes this confession, police and FBI run in and they want to arrest him because he is a wanted fugitive. And he tries to tell them like, no, like it was all made up, it's fake. But they don't listen to him and instead he is dramatically shot. And Monk tosses this idea out, even though it is a cliche that he says earlier in the movie that he doesn't like. However, the Hollywood executive loves it and he's like, that's perfect. And so that is the movie that he is going to make, and Monk is just kind of like, okay. And then it ends with him driving off with his brother Cliff. Oh, and also the producer is like, well, what happened in real life? What did you do? And he tells him that in real life, he just got up and left the ceremony and it was very anticlimactic and nothing happened essentially. But to talk about the book title, obviously the book and movie have different titles. And in one of the vignettes we get in the book, we get a conversation between these two people, one of whom is an artist, and an artist gives a drawing to this other guy and the other guy erases the drawing. And then we read Rauschenberg, who is the guy who erased the drawing. Nice job, eh? It was a lot of work erasing it. My wrist is still sore. I call it erased drawing. De Kooning. That's very clever. Rauschenberg. I've already sold it for 10 grand. De Kooning. You sold my picture? Rauschenberg. No, I erased your picture. I sold my erasing. And so this clearly seems to reflect the title of the book, right? Because Monk erased who he became in order to become Stag R. Lee. But it could also represent the industry like erasing stories of people of color and creating their own version of the story and then selling the erased version. And this also makes me think of a line in the movie where the editor tells Monk, he's like, white people think they want the truth about what it's like to be Black in America, but really they just want to be absolved. Like they don't actually want the truth. And then I also, like I said, I wanted to talk about the similarities between, Van Gogh and Monk. And because as I was reading this book, once I finished it, I was like, man, there's so much I feel there between these two stories. And there's a reason why we get so much of Monk's personal life. And there's a reason why we read his whole book that he writes. Like there's something here. And I kind of had a hard time fully grasping the parallels until I found that essay by DeLilly, which again was fantastic. I will link to it. But I wanted to share what she says. So she says, these two characters, Van Gogh and Monk, also share a sense of hopelessness and anger with the interlocking system of oppression that make it nearly impossible for them to be themselves or truly succeed. Both men blame everyone else except themselves for their failures. Monk is frustrated with the publishing industry, with the reading public, and finally with his newfound love interest, Coraline, for reading the book he hates. Van Gogh feels like he could have been out there with a good job, making some good money in an office or something, and graduated from high school if one of his old teachers had not kicked him out. Neither character could change, defeat, or outsmart the system, and so they succumb to it. It is at this point in his writing career that Monk reflects on why he wrote My Pafology and how his motivation had come from his anger and dissatisfaction with the world. He had tried to write something worse that would possibly open people's eyes to the flawed and racist writing of other authors such as Santara Golden, but by creating something worse, he simply made things worse. And although he loves his mother and does not want to send her to a convalescence home to die, with each one of her outbursts, his patience grows thin. Eventually, he makes the difficult decision to send her to a retirement home. Given her condition, he says, I wanted very much to commit her. I was troubled by the word commit. One commits murder or suicide, permanent things. Similarly, as Van Gogh did by stabbing his mother in his dream, Monk murders his mother by sending her away. His paranoia about discovery eventually catches up to him. Likewise, in My Pafology, Van Gogh realizes that he can no longer run from who he has become. He is trapped the same way Monk finds himself trapped. The most comparable moment, however, comes when Monk finally steps on stage. The lights were brighter than ever, constant flooding light. I looked at the television cameras looking at me. At an earlier date, Monk had written about this very same moment, but he was sitting in a getaway car as 19-year-old Van Gogh, crazed and excited that the cameras is pointing at me, I be on TV. The tragic ending of My Pafology mirrors that of Monk's own literary career and the ending of his potential sanity. And when it comes to book versus movie, so first of all, I want to hear everybody's thoughts on this book and movie, especially the book. Like, there are just so many layers to this. I don't know if it is studied in like schools or colleges, but it should be because again, there is just so much to get into, so many interesting parallels and themes and references and so much to analyze. And while the movie doesn't have as many layers and it is more straightforward, I think the changes they make for a better movie though, right? Because just because something works so well as a book, it doesn't mean it is going to transfer as well in a film, right? And so some of the changes I do prefer in the movie, such as seeing more of Santara Golden, but some of the other changes I just like because it just works so much better in the medium of filmmaking, you know? And so just knowing what to include and what not to when changing the medium is so important. And Cord Jefferson also adapted this book, and he did a fantastic job. And like I said, like he puts his own twist on it, like with the changing endings and things, talking to the Hollywood executive, but they all just work so well for a movie. So at the end of the day, when it comes to book versus movie, it is so hard to choose which one I like better because the book is fantastic as a book, but then the movie is fantastic for what it is as a film. And so it's basically a tie, but because I like to choose a winner at the end, I almost want to say the movie wins because it is just a great adaptation and we get amazing performances and it is so funny. And yeah, like I said, it's definitely not as dark, which I like the book for what it is. And I'm not saying I wish the book was different, but in the book, like with the ending, you know, he doesn't make amends with his brother or Coraline, although he doesn't make amends with Coraline in the movie either. But they also aren't able to enjoy Lorraine's wedding. Like that whole experience is just very depressing. And then his sister being shot by a protester rather than having her have a heart attack, like being shot was a much darker way to die. And just the way the book ends as well. And Monk is also very suicidal partway through the book. And so it is just more serious, even with its humor. But yeah, so I kind of liked that the movie maybe didn't make it quite as heavy. Again, not that I wish the book was different. I'm okay with the changes the movie made. So anyway, I'm just rambling now, but basically I love both. But at the end, I guess I will go ahead and say the movie wins. But if you like the movie, definitely read the book. And if you want more book versus movie content that relates to award-winning movies, I covered Killers of the Flower Moon, and that is another movie that is up for a lot of awards. But Leonardo DiCaprio did not get nominated for Best Actor. Robert De Niro got a nomination, and yet not DiCaprio. Like, he was incredible in that movie. So was Lily Gladstone. She got nominated. But also Killers did not get a nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay. What? That makes no sense. That screenplay was fantastic. So how was it not nominated? But anyway, this and American Fiction were both nominated for a number of awards. So yeah, I will link to Killers of the Flower Moon on the screen if that interests you. And do not forget to like and subscribe if you have not already. And again, share your thoughts down below in the comments. And I will see you next time. Bye.